The Effects of Technology Breaks on Media Multitasking, presented by Rebecca Docksteader, Samantha Ferris, and Vinson, graduate students attending Ball State University.
This presentation will cover literature review, purpose, methods, results, limitations, conclusion, and future research.
We'll begin with the literature review. First, the target behavior, which is media multitasking. Beaulieu, Guinness, and McDonald describe media multitasking as alternating between completing academic tasks and using technology for non-academic purposes, such as checking text messages or social media. Time that students spend on their phones engaging in activities such as texting or consuming social media during independent study is time that's taken away from the material that they could be studying. This causes them to increase the length of study time, which could be disadvantageous to students who have poor time management skills. This interruption in the natural flow, so to speak, of study not only increases the time directly by taking time away from studying, but it also indirectly by affecting the quality of the study. The use of personal devices has proven to be a distraction in classroom settings, both for the student that's using the device as well as those around. This distraction takes an even greater role in the place of independent study, where there is no teacher present to mediate the distraction or to implement even punishment for the use of the personal device. During independent study, it's entirely up to the learner to mitigate their media multitasking. While this behavior continues to prove to be intrusive, research has shown that even though a student may be aware of the negative effects of media multitasking, Toyama and Hashi found that this is not enough to keep them from engaging in the behavior, but instead that the intervention must include an approach that goes beyond just providing the information of the negative effects to the students, and rather provides them with direct results on the behavior itself. In order to evaluate the effectiveness of independent study in relation to phone usage during study, college students participated in a study where they were divided into 3 groups: a control group, a low distraction group, and a high distraction group. Participants viewed a video lecture and were instructed to take notes while being delivered varying amounts of distraction in the form of text messages or social media posting. Kuznetsov and Titsworth found that texting and posting diminished the number of notes recorded by the student during the lectures, and that result in subsequent impaired performance on various types of tests. This demonstrates that the overall quality of study is impaired directly by the media multitasking during independent study, and in fact, the difference in performance between the high distraction group and the control group was a full letter grade. Students are only able to do one thing at a time, and activities such as taking notes or reading the textbook simply cannot be completed while the learner's attention is on their personal device. For this reason, it's imperative that for the student's success that they have self-management strategies available to them in order to increase the effectiveness of their independent study and reduce harmful distractions. Next, we look at the intervention. And when looking at media multitasking behavior, it can be presumed that at least in part, this is an escape-maintained behavior. Participants are accessing negative reinforcement through the removal of an aversive stimulus, which in this case is their schoolwork. The second piece of this is access to tangibles. Participants are positively reinforced when they pick up their personal devices by gaining access to preferred platforms such as text messaging or social media. Interventions that have proven to be effective for tangible and escape-maintained behaviors are non-contingent reinforcement and non-contingent escape. Non-contingent reinforcement is described by Waller and Higbee as the delivery of reinforcement on a fixed time schedule. In the case of the present study, this can also be seen as non-contingent escape, which is the removal of aversive stimulation on a response-independent schedule. Providing both non-contingent escape and non-contingent reinforcement for media multitasking behavior can take shape as program media breaks. In the study conducted by Guinness, Beaulieu, and McDonald in 2018, this involved a time-based schedule signaling learners to take a break from their independent study and engage with their personal devices. During this time, participants were gaining access to their desired activities and escape from undesirable activities in the hopes of decreasing the media multitasking at other times. Hagopian and and all describe the two behavioral processes that make non-contingent reinforcement effective as satiation and extinction. The first part of this, they describe satiation as an establishing operation that decreases the effectiveness of a reinforcer, occurs as a function of a prior exposure or access to that reinforcer. This suggests that providing participants with frequent access to the reinforcer, in this case, that'd be access to the activities on their personal cell phone, such as texting, the reinforcer loses its novelty, therefore decreasing its reinforcing value. The next piece, operant extinction, broadly defined, is the elimination of the reinforcement contingency. Typically, extinction procedures involve withholding the maintaining reinforcer following the response. However, the use of extinction can be challenging, especially in the case that reinforcement is being independently accessed, like in this particular study. In this case, non-contingent reinforcement can be effective without the use of extinction. This was shown in a study involving teenage participants engaging in disruptive behavior maintained by escape, specifically from math work in a school classroom. During the intervention, they took an in-seat break from their math activities for 30 seconds to a minute, and the study showed a rapid decrease in disruptive behavior and an increase in appropriate behaviors, and this was the same across both participants. Furthermore, non-contingent reinforcement was also used for children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, exhibiting a range of challenging behaviors that were determined to be maintained by access to preferred items. In their intervention, researchers provided non-contingent access to the preferred items without the use of extinction and saw that challenging behaviors were reduced to zero and near zero across participants. And this was found by Hagopian and colleagues in 2000. Similar procedures were used in the form of non-contingent escape for children with speech delays exhibiting disruptive behaviors in therapy sessions. And this was hypothesized to be escape maintained, and researchers used non-contingent escape procedures for these disruptive behaviors by providing breaks throughout the session. And this study concluded and found that there was a decrease in disruptive behaviors across participants with the use of non-contingent escape, as well as an increase in compliance for all participants. The above studies show that the use of non-contingent reinforcement and non-contingent escape for various escape and access maintained behaviors, showing that the behavior tactic of providing intermittent technology breaks independent of responding procedurally aligns with non-contingent reinforcement or time-based schedules.
There are increasing numbers of media platforms available to consumers every day. However, time remains limited. This becomes problematic for students as they try to complete their studies while simultaneously staying up to date on the newest trends. The goal of the study was to replicate the effectiveness of programmed media breaks in reducing media multitasking as demonstrated by Guinness, Beaulieu, and McDonald in 2018. With more recent research demonstrating that college students are showing signs of being addicted to media usage, which has been seen to cause an increase in insomnia and mental health problems, it is of great social importance to determine this intervention's effectiveness. The researchers believed that by taking timed, prompted breaks during independent study, the impulse to go on their phone would decrease significantly, thus ensuring more time is spent on schooling. Studying female college students over the course of 8 weeks, researchers were closely following the relationship between the intervention and the number of media multitasking instances participants engaged in.
Participants initially included 5 female college students attending an online program at Ball State University. The participants each took advanced applied behavior analysis and accessed classes through their personal computers from their respective homes in their state. Over the course of the study, 2 of the participants withdrew from the study in the corresponding class. This left the following 3 participants: Rebecca Docksteader, a 25-year-old female from Virginia, Samantha Ferris, a 26-year-old female from New Jersey, and Essence Vinson, a 26-year-old female from Maryland. Each participant needed their personal computer, their cell phone, and access to a timer. Participants completed academic work on their computers and used the timer to incorporate prompted media breaks. Data was uploaded into a shared Excel sheet in Microsoft OneDrive. Inter-observer agreement, or IOA, was collected via video from their personal computer and uploaded into Microsoft OneDrive as well. Researchers met approximately once per week over Zoom meetings to touch base about the progress of the study.
Response definitions and measurement. Media multitasking was defined as using a cell phone for non-academic purposes for any duration for reading and/or responding to text messages, surfing the internet, browsing social media, or any activities not related to classes taken through Ball State University. Examples of this included scrolling through Instagram or online shopping. Non-examples included responding to a text message or email about a group project. Schoolwork was defined as any instance of note-taking for a class, watching lecture videos, taking quizzes or tests, reading over an assignment, and anything related to any classes taken at Ball State University. A program technology break was defined as using a cell phone for non-academic purposes for any duration, for reading and/or responding to text messages, surfing the internet, browsing social media, or any activities not related to classes taken through Ball State University after receiving the signal from the preset programmed break timer. Media breaks were 30 seconds to 1 minute in duration. Participants utilized frequency data collection to track any instances of media multitasking through phone pickups tracked on the participant's personal iPhone screen time feature, and 2 sessions per week were recorded for IOA purposes.
Data was collected individually by participants. As each participant subsequently completed their sessions, they took data on the frequency of their media multitasking outside of the prompted media breaks. Participants then uploaded this data into a shared OneDrive for the researchers to see. Intervention phases were noted when uploading was complete. This study utilized a multiple baseline design across participants. Intervention was staggered across participants, beginning with Rebecca, who completed 7 baseline sessions, followed by Essence, who completed 11 baseline sessions, and ending with Samantha, who completed 13 baseline sessions. Participants moved from baseline to intervention once the data demonstrated stability. The independent variable was applied across the subjects in a sequential manner, depending on whether or not there was a prior functional relationship between the participants.
Each session lasted 60 minutes. Each participant had a different number of baseline sessions based upon the previous participant's data, as well as the stability of their own baseline data. Rebecca, Essence, and Samantha had 7, 11, and 13 sessions of baseline data respectively. Participants sat in a private area of their choosing and completed academic activities for their graduate level classes at Ball State University. Participants were permitted to have any study materials, for example, books, notebooks, and flashcards, and their cell phones in the area where they worked. Participants were instructed to complete their studying and classwork as they typically do. Weekly observations were recorded for 1 hour using the camera on the participant's personal computer. Upon completion of the baseline phase, data was evaluated to determine the appropriate intervals for program breaks. The program breaks were determined by calculating the approximate average inter-response time between instances of media multitasking during baseline for an hour-long session. For an hour-long session, this was calculated by dividing 60 minutes by the frequency of media multitasking instances. This was done for each baseline session. Then the average time across the baseline condition was calculated. Participants were then instructed to set a recurring timer on their personal device to prompt them to take a program technology break. Media breaks were 30 seconds to 1 minute in duration. When the participant engaged in 1 or fewer instances of media multitasking across 2 sessions, the time between program breaks was extended. The phase change lines in our graphs were placed in between our baseline data and the start of the intervention as program technology breaks were introduced. Starting intervals for program technology breaks were based upon baseline data as detailed in previous sections. When a participant engaged in 1 instance of media multitasking or less across 2 sessions, the time between program technology breaks was increased by 5 minutes and a phase change line was inserted. Phase changes vary across participants as this was contingent upon the participant meeting mastery criteria for each phase. Additionally, Rebecca completed an additional phase at the beginning of intervention for program media breaks every 15 minutes based upon her baseline data, and Samantha completed 2 additional phases in the end of her study for 45 minutes and 50 minutes respectively due to reaching mastery criteria for all previous phases.
Inter-observer agreement, or IOA, was calculated for 2 sessions weekly, which equated to 40% of observations, with there being 5 weekly sessions. 2 weekly observations were recorded by each participant using the camera on their personal computer. This video was then uploaded to a shared document folder where the second observer could access it. For the media multitasking behavior, IOA was calculated based on the total frequency count for the duration of the session. IOA was then calculated by dividing the number of agreements as represented by the smaller frequency count by the number of opportunities, by the total number of opportunities for agreement as represented by the greater frequency count. This was then multiplied by 100 to render a percentage. Data was accessed and calculations were made using a shared Excel spreadsheet. And in the case that further information was needed for IOA purposes, the secondary observer contacted the participant to gain access to images captured using their cell phone of the phone's recorded data for phone access during that interval of time. The average IOA for Rebecca was 95.5%, for Essence 81.9%, and for Samantha 90%. Essence collected IOA data for Rebecca's sessions, Samantha collected IOA data for Essence's sessions, and Rebecca collected IOA data for Samantha's sessions.
Participants saved screen-captured images of their iPhone screen time feature displaying the number of phone pickups per session as proof of data. Participants followed a checklist to ensure procedural integrity was being maintained. An example of this checklist is included on this slide. For each task listed in the checklist, participants had to mark the yes or no column if the step was completed. The checklist was filled out each session that data was being collected. The goal was to have 100% of the steps completed for each observation. To calculate the percentage of steps completed on the checklist, participants had to divide the number of steps accurately implemented by the total number of items in the checklist, which was a total of 8. This number was then multiplied by 100, the goal percentage, to calculate the actual percentage. All participants scored 100% for procedural integrity. After the study concluded, participants took a multiple statement assessment. Each statement was followed by a 5-point Likert scale of 1, strongly disagree, 2, somewhat disagree, 3, neutral, 2, somewhat disagree, and 1, strongly agree. The assessment was used to assess the social validity of this study from the participants' point of view. The goal was to see if the research was successful, the results were meaningful, and if this is an important topic of research among college students. An example of this assessment, of the assessment questions, is shown on this slide. Based on the answers of the participants' post-assessments, all participants agreed that the research is socially valid. The treatment goals, procedures, and outcomes were accepted by all participants, and all were willing to implement the parameters of this study. Each participant benefited from the intervention by having more focused independence during study sessions. The study is relevant to all participants in the effort to see the effects of the programmed media breaks.
The effectiveness and the success of the program breaks for each participant varied at different sessions. The data demonstrates that the success of program breaks was determined by each participant's personal satiation. This is the time and frequency at which participants experience satiation. There is a functional relationship between the dependent and independent variable for each of the participants.
For myself, media multitasking occurred at moderate levels with low variability during baseline. The average number of instances of media multitasking during baseline was 3.71 occurrences. During intervention with participant-implemented programmed media breaks, low to moderate levels of media multitasking were observed with a decreasing trend. At the beginning Of each phase change and faded program break, the level of media multitasking jumped to moderate levels, and then the level changed and a decreasing trend was observed. Aside from the change to program breaks every 40 minutes, which demonstrated greater variability in data. Consistent across the intervention is a decreasing trend in media multitasking, suggesting a functional relationship between the program media breaks, or the independent variable, and the media multitasking, which is the dependent variable. The average number of media multitasking during the intervention was 1.30 occurrences. My data shows that in the first few phase changes, while program media breaks occurred up to every 30 minutes, the intervention was quickly effective in reducing or even eliminating media multitasking. As programmed breaks occurred less frequently, the data showed greater variability and levels of media multitasking were not as directly impacted. This suggests that for me, the optimal time for program media breaks was every 30 minutes.
For me, media breaks occurred at a low to high levels during baseline and had high variability. The average number of media multitasking during baseline was 2.92 occurrences. Once participants implemented the intervention of prompted media breaks, the average media multitasking was 0.8 occurrences. The level was low to moderate, and variability was low. As the intervention progressed with increased times, I maintained a stable level with an average of 0 for each subsequent phase change. Intervention was successful for me. The functional relationship between the independent and dependent variable was consistent throughout the phase changes to satiate media multitasking. Data showed that I needed a minimum of 1 break during my academic sessions to mitigate media multitasking.
For myself, media multitasking occurred at higher levels during baseline. The average number of multitasking during the baseline phase was 2.45 occurrences. When the intervention began, there was little to no variation in the data, with the average of multitasking occurrences being 0, and the multimedia tasking occurred at low rates. As the phase changes occurred, the time between program media breaks increased, and the multitasking occurred at higher levels and then dropped closer to the end of the phase. This suggests that I had more success with more frequent multimedia breaks, as shown in the data for the 20 and 25-minute sessions.
Over the course of replicating the original study, participants felt and noticed many limitations. One being that the technology used to store data in IOA, i.e. Microsoft OneDrive, was not as reliable as participants had hoped. IOA videos that each participant took of themselves and then uploaded into Microsoft OneDrive would take much longer than expected to fully upload. Some participants had to cancel and upload multiple times before it would be successful. Occasionally, data would be missing or IOA videos were no longer there. There were also issues faced with participants and their personal computers. Some had to record and upload their IOA in smaller increments because their computer would not allow them to record for so long. Others would have their computer stop recording randomly. In the original study, participants were attending the same college in person, while the participants from this study were attending the same college but online. Participants in the original study were put into a small, sanitized room that was not their typical environment to complete academic tasks, while participants of the recent study were able to implement the interventions in the regular area of study. The drastic change in environments could have led to issues with experimental control and ultimately skewed data. While participants were recorded during their study times, they may not have needed to take media breaks as frequently, being that they were in a comfortable and potentially naturally stimulating environment. The replication group ultimately lost 2 participants due to withdrawals from the class. In the original study, it did not state whether those participants were in the same class, but in the same grade at the same college. Potential differences in workloads may have made a difference on participation, being that it was on a volunteer basis. Losing almost half of the participants also changed the way data was supposed to be set up. Originally, the replication was supposed to have systematically staggered baselines, but since 2 participants left the class, the data did not line up the same. It also changed the way IOA was taken. Each participant had been assigned another participant to take IOA on. Losing 2 participants changed the assignment order. Each session lasted 1 hour in duration, which may mimic a real work session for some students, but not all. With that being stated, some participants may not have felt the need to take media breaks, being that the duration did not require such a reward. Looking at participant data tables, there was significant difference in what day of the week and the time of day participants worked on their respective academics. Some participants worked early in the morning during the week, some participants worked late at night throughout the week and weekend, and some participants spent all day during the weekend. Participants also noted personal variables that influenced when and how they completed their work sessions. Growing up in louder environments and needing to mimic the same noise level they are used to, not having an opportunity to be alone when conducting sessions, getting interrupted by household members or duties needing to be completed, and the occurrence of family emergency matters. When interpreting results in the original study, researchers noted that intervention was successful, but no mastery criteria was mentioned for each participant. When researchers were interpreting results in their replication study, they noticed that while the intervention did not look successful at first between each participant, when looking at the specific phase changes, a functional relationship can be seen for each participant. After those times, the intervention was no longer strong enough to satiate media multitasking.
Future research should consider the aforementioned limitations, including difficulties with technology and time constraints. A key component requiring further research is the relationship between the frequency or latency of program media breaks and the effectiveness of the intervention. Mastery criterion should be evaluated for each participant individually using a regression model. This could involve a reversal to previous phase of program breaks contingent upon a fixed number of days above 2 instances of media multitasking. If instances of media multitasking were to return to low levels with this reversal, this would demonstrate a functional relationship between media multitasking and a specific phase of the intervention.
Overall, this research's purpose was to determine if implementing program media breaks will decrease frequency of media multitasking during independent study for college students. Each participant's data varied due to external environmental factors.